Welcome back then folks to day 2 of Special Projects pack number 15, and this one is an old girl in my projects list because although none of you had any idea of this, I have had this build in my garage for a long time. This is probably earlier than pack number 1. I've had it for that long, and something about the car I just couldn't get on with. I didn't like how the car ended up handling, I wasn't a fan of it, and it's one of the very few occasions where the physics changes have made this so much better to drive. So I jumped in it totally randomly the other day for one of the weekly seasonals. It was great to drive. I made a couple of minor tweaks and I love it now. It handles as I was hoping it would back then. So fair play to the physics changes for doing a good thing for a change. So as far as this one goes, as you can kind of tell, those who know their racing regulations, it will be pretty obvious. This doesn't exist. It's not a thing. There was no GT1 in this kind of sense by the time the F12 came around. So this is an alternate history, if you will, and essentially using the Ferrari F12 to substitute for the Ferrari 550, or like the 575 equivalent, wherein that car was up against the Celine S7, the Maserati MC12, I believe the Aston Martin DBR9 as well, that kind of really cool era after stuff like the Toyota GT1, but before the racing classes got changed and altered, as they always do, to what we have now. So basically like the mid to early 2000s kind of stuff. What if the F12 was built to those regs? So 1150 kilos, about 620 horsepower, pretty much on par with the Maserati MC12. So on paper, it sounds like a good idea. Obviously in practice, we'll have to see. As far as the livery, loads of people have done racing liveries for this one. So of course, because it's not a real car, you could go for whatever livery you want. This one I personally like because, again, it's very similar to the old Ferrari 550s, such as the one Colin McRae drove, of course, at Le Mans. As far as the parts, you want your Stage 1 weight, of course. I'll jump into the Ultimate first. Just wanted to double check that I didn't have the extreme weight, so it doesn't, of course, on this car. Stage 1 weight, you have the sports hards anyway, of course, I'm not using those for this. We've got the high lift cams, the bored out engine, high compression pistons. We've got the Stage 2 weight, the power restrictor and the ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, the racing crank, of course the ECU, the semi-race exhaust, that is actually the one which I would recommend you get, which is a little strange for a racing build. The reason why I've done that is the visuals, because the race exhaust on this one I think looks pretty bad. It's just a big old twin pipe, one on either side, and it just looks really weird, so I wanted it to still have the quad pipes. If you don't care about that, then sure, I guess you could go for the racing one, but that's why I've done that particular change. We've got the fully customised diff, of course the next stage of weight reduction as well. For the racing stuff, the polished ports, the balance tuning, the air filter you don't need, the silencer, like I said, you also don't need. You don't need the manifold either. These were just things I was, trying out and testing around with. Of course, you do want your racing pads. We've got the discs. I've gone for drilled. You could go for drilled, slotted, carbon ceramic. As always, it's up to you. Of course, the race clutch, flywheel, suspension, and transmission. And naturally, I've gone for racing hards in particular. Racing softs I have purchased in the past, but that's down to you and your preference. We've got the steering angle adapter to help the turn in. I must have used this for a speed build at some point in the past because it's got nitrous fitted. Of course you don't need that. And for the extreme stuff, just the carbon prop shaft, and that's basically it. So you could go crazy with power, but then you just have to restrict it to get it back down to GT1 kind of regulation. So again, it's up to you. If you want to build it for something else and don't really care about the GT1 style regs, then sure, you could just use this as like a handling build if you want to, and then change the rest. But if you want to do what I've done, then of course you're going to be looking at 736 points. So not quite a cash cow. I don't know if the fuel economy on this thing would be great as a cash cow anyway, but there you go. As far as the suspension, we've got 95mm front, 100mm rear, 5 on anti-roll, 30 and 40 for the dampers, fairly high on the springs, 3.45, 3 degrees of camber. As far as the toe, we've got 15, or 0.15 front and rear, but we've towed out 0.15 front and in 0.15 rear, of course both for stability. As far as the diff, I love how it feels with this one, which is 10, 35 and 30. As far as the transmission, kind of a mid-range. It's not too long, not too short. 330 kilometers an hour is, what's that, up around like 220-ish miles an hour, so that should be enough for most tracks, even if you don't actually get to that speed. But of course you could change it as necessary. The ballast is 22 kilos, just to bring us up to the correct 1150. I've put that all the way to the front. It's still a rear-biased car, ironically, for a front-engine GT. Very quattroporte style in that regard. So, of course, I've put that to the front to get it a little bit closer to that 50-50 split. As far as the ECU, I've restricted that right down to 70%. As far as the downforce, those are maximum, because, of course, I'm going more so for, for grip and for cornering. And then as far as the parts over here, you can see that I've gone for the race, or I should say semi-race exhaust, and then all the other stuff is fitted or not fitted, as the case may require. So of course now we will jump out to a track, Catalunya in particular, to check out what the car can do in practice. Now my notes on this one, as I always like to give a brief note on how to use the car, how to get the best out of it in a particular build. This one's pretty easy to give notes on because it is a pleasure to work with. This car is smooth, it's svelte, it's fun. You could definitely use it in career mode. Like I said, I did the other day to destroy the AI, and it was just a happy turn of chance that it ended up being such a fun car. You could restrict it, I guess, down to 700. You could build it up a little bit more to like 750 maybe, with more power if you wanted to, or less weight. It's all down to your preference. You could fit a different livery and go for like an F12 XX kind of build using this as a base. So of course that's the joy of it being fictional. You don't have to stick to what I've done. If you do what I've done, then of course you will get the most consistent results to what I've done. I can't guarantee how this would handle, for example, with 900 horsepower, let's say, or a difference in weight, of course, which would change the weight distribution, etc, etc. But if you do decide to use it, try it in this form first. That's what I would recommend. In terms of the handling, in terms of throttle control, my advice is let it kind of cruise through the midway point of the corner and then just roll on the throttle. Don't slam on the throttle to exit the corner. Roll its way on, keep it nice and smooth. If you treat the car with respect and smooth it through the corners, it is very, very rewarding in response to that. So if you do use it for racing or just for fun, I hope you enjoy it. For now, it's about the closest we can get to an actual Ferrari 550 GT1 in the game. Of course, that would be an awesome car to have back. And of course, stick around for more in pack number 15 this week. We've got another build later today. Check out the ones from yesterday, of course, and I'll see you then with more. But for now, thanks for watching.